Regardless if your heater is gas or electric, a typical family of 4 needs a 40 to 50 gallon water heater. Anything smaller could actually be inadequate for your family's needs. In addition, a thermostat that exceeds the medium setting, or 140 degrees Fahrenheit, is not only wasteful of energy, but poses a scalding hazard and will shorten your heater's lifespan. Most manufacturers have actually lowered the preset temperature from 150 degrees to 120 degrees. The best way to check your hot water temperature is to simply put your thermometer under the faucet closest to the water heater. Remember that any temperature over 120 degrees lowers the amount of time the water takes to scald your skin. Tank water heaters are gas, electric, or oil-fired. Basically, a lined steel tank is covered with an insulated sheet metal jacket to reduce heat loss. The lining is usually some form of glass, but can also be stone or copper. A magnesium anode is suspended in the tank to minimize surface corrosion. Electrochemical actions that cause corrosion take place between this sacrificial rod and the water rather than the tank and the water. The first thing to logically inspect is the water line itself. We are looking for leaks at or around the water heater, especially at the pipes connecting to the heater itself. This area is prone to leaks because the water pipes are subject to drastic temperature changes as the water heats and cools. If your water heater is in the basement, be on the lookout for moisture damage and corrosion, usually indicated by rust on pipes or at the bottom of metal appliances. One area of controversy is a heater insulation jacket. On one hand, your local code may require it, but on the other hand, manufacturers will void their warranty if the instructions aren't visible. The bottom line is to follow the manufacturer instructions first and foremost. Every water heater is required to have a temperature and pressure relief valve, more commonly called the T&P valve. This is the last line of defense against a dangerous explosion. There are 2 other devices that have to fail before a T&P valve kicks in. First, the thermostat, which controls how long the unit receives power, must fail to turn off and continually heat the water. When this happens, a device with a little red button attached to the top of the upper thermostat, called the overload, will sense the high temperature and open both of the 240 volt legs to cease power to the heater. This red button will pop out about 1/4 of an inch. If this device fails as well, the water heater will continue to heat until it reaches a preset temperature and pressure. The T&P valve activates and releases the pressurized water to keep the tank from exploding. However, this is a steady drip or sputter and not released all at once. Older water heaters may have their valves installed on either of the water lines to sense pressure alone. Situations like this should be updated because the valve may be so old it doesn't work anymore. Water heaters that are coated with condensation are cooled on the outside and give a false temperature to the thermostat, thus overheating the water. Any air gap between the thermostat and the tank will also give false temperature readings. Verify that your T&P valve doesn't drip. A slow drip can indicate a bad valve or a malfunctioning thermostat. If the incoming water pressure to your house exceeds 80 pounds per square inch, a pressure reducer valve should be installed. This often happens when a city water tank is higher on land than someone's house. To avoid having water sprayed all over the tank or someone's face, there should be a pipe extending from the T&P female threads to a few inches above the floor. This is normally a 3/4 of an inch pipe that should not be threaded at the bottom end. It is a disadvantage to have this pipe extending to a drain or sink because you will never know a discharge has occurred. Instead, have it drain into a bucket or large jar so a problem can be noted. The bottom line is to make sure your water heater has a T&P valve and to visually make sure it's working. Don't raise the little arm to test it because the valve could have rust or debris get caught and the valve could jam or constantly drip. Pans are needed to catch water when there's a leak. These are especially important to water heaters located on or above an area where the floor or ceiling can be damaged. If your heater doesn't have a pan in place, consider getting one before a leak occurs and rots the floor beneath it. Any water heater with metal pipes is required to have a grounding jumper. This is a 10-gauge copper wire bonding the cold water line to the hot water line. All of the voltage then gets bled to the ground by another heavy-duty ground wire that connects one of the metal pipes to the ground system of the house. As we discussed in our electricity lesson, the jumper allows a continuous ground connection in the event of water heater replacement. When there is no jumper present, an excessive voltage buildup on one pipe could jump to a person installing a new heater. Another symptom to look for is mud stains around the base of the unit, which indicates previous water issues. Turn off the power to the unit and remove the bottom cover. If there is a problem with the element, you will see burned wiring or melted plastic. Gas water heaters require a few more checks than electric heaters. The first thing to note is the presence of flammables nearby. Flames from the access panel have poured out to nearby flammables on more than one occasion. Next, check the gas line fittings for leaks by one of two methods. An electronic sniffer device can be used, or a simple homemade method can be applied to gas fittings using a mixture of soap and water. If the mixture bubbles, there is a leak present. Checking for leaks not only requires sniffing, but listening. A flame that makes a noise, then burns quietly, and then makes noise again isn't getting enough combustion air, or rust debris is covering the burner plate. Rust debris all over the burner plate could be releasing a variety of toxic gases, including carbon monoxide, into the surrounding air where there is not enough combustion air burning with the gas. The threat of toxic gases is even more dangerous in a small, unvented room. The flue pipe at the top of the water heater should also be inspected. A single wall flue pipe should be at least 6 inches away from flammable materials. Drywall is not considered flammable, however studs and joists are. Single wall pipes are known to sweat on the inside, and this acidic condensate runs down into the heater and rusts everything out. A double wall flue pipe has an outer shell, airspace, and a metal inner shell, and should be no closer than 1 inch from flammables. The flue pipe should attach to a draft hood with an air gap. Place your hand near the diverter when the unit is operational. If you feel a flow of gas on your hand, there is a blockage in the flue that must be corrected. Every gas water heater requires a cutoff valve for turning off gas. There must also be a dirt lake present as shown in the picture. This is a combination of fittings arranged in a T shape to stop dirt and debris from entering the control module. The gas line enters vertically from the top, and flowing gas makes a 90-degree turn into the system. The bottom section catches any metal shavings or debris. This was very useful in the days that fossil fuel products were made on site, but nowadays most companies have switched to a much cleaner natural gas. A tankless coil water heater is also referred to as an instantaneous water heater. These are used in conjunction with steam and hot water boilers. Most of the time, this is a small diameter pipe in the form of a coil that is inside of a boiler. However, the coil could be on the outside of the boiler unit as well. Regardless, the hot boiler water gives up heat to the cold water flowing in the coil until the temperature is increased by 100 degrees Fahrenheit. These units have flow regulating valves designed for a specific flow rate, typically 3 to 8 gallons per minute. There is also a mixing valve present between the cold inlet and hot inlet pipes to regulate how much hot water gets distributed, as well as preventing scalding. Begin your inspection in the bathroom. Turn on the hot water at the sink and the tub simultaneously and observe the flow. If the flow is low, suspect mineral deposits. At the boiler, look at the joints around the tankless heater mounting plate. This area is very vulnerable to leaks. Any water stains or deposits around the joint require maintenance. Remember that deposits sometimes self-seal, but this is only temporary. Sometimes, all that is needed is tightening of the mounting bolts around the joint or replacing the gasket around the leaky joint. Check around the mixing valve for signs of leaks. Also, look for a T&P valve on the hot water outlet line of the tankless coil. If there is any storage tank, the T&P valve may be present on this. The temperature of the boiler water is controlled by an aquastat. You can check the operation by opening a hot faucet. After a while, the temperature of the boiler water will drop, and the aquastat will cause the gas or oil burner to fire. An indirect fired storage unit was introduced to the market in the mid-1970s. They typically have about a 40-gallon capacity and rely on a separate boiler used for space heating. The boiler water flows through a coil in the heat exchanger that is surrounded by domestic water. The inner core of the heat exchanger is surrounded by an outer helical coil, which results in a high recovery rate in the event of a power outage. The aquastat calls for more hot water after about 15 to 20 gallons of hot water are used. These units have a very high recovery rate, which keeps boiler firings to a minimum. To test your unit, raise the thermostat to hot or run a faucet until the unit fires. After the unit fires, the pipes supplying water should be hot. Look for signs of leakage around the base. Make sure there is a T&P valve mounted directly on the tank casing. If you adjusted the thermostat, don't forget to reset it. And finally, if you live in a hard water area, if the domestic water does not get very hot, there may be lime built up on the heat exchanger, and the coil is in need of cleaning or replacement.